boy, do we have a treat for you here today. We have one of the biggest playable characters of all playable characters in this sea of non-playable characters. Today we have Jimmy Song on to talk about his life, his adventure, his journey in Bitcoin, and to talk about his book that he just released, Fiat Ruins Everything, which is a book after my own heart, the thing I always keep coming back to about fiat and government currencies destroying everything and pulling prosperity in the future, enslaving our future generations. And Jimmy goes into great detail in this book about the roots of that and the culture around that and the reasons why this happened. And it's geared towards Bitcoiners actually, but it's more of a plea and a manifesto to say, hey, this is why we're in this. It's almost, we talk about it in here, like Thomas Paine writing about times to try men's souls, or you have like the Federalist Papers back in the founding era, where we are arguing for the reasons we are doing these things, why we are at war. And we're in an information war right now. We're in a cultural war. And Jimmy talks about these things and why fiat is so pervasive and why it's destroying everything we have around us, and how sound money and Bitcoin can reshape that future and right the ship, so to speak. So enjoy this interview. It's absolutely amazing. Jimmy is one of the smartest people I know. It's a pleasure to be able to interview him and an honor. And he is truly one of the most playable characters we have in the sound money, freedom, liberty, Bitcoin space. Enjoy. Jimmy Song, thank you so much for joining us today. I always talk about finding playable characters in the world in a sea of non-playable characters. So fortunately, we found another one. Thank you so much, Jimmy, for coming on. Looking forward to talking about your book and some of the projects you're working on. So thank you, Jimmy.
Well, thank you for having me on, and I look forward to this conversation.
So you obviously have, I kind of cut to the chase a little bit. You obviously have a book coming out, or it's out, I should say. Yep. Fiat Ruins Everything. I actually get my prop as well. This is one of my favorite books. Thank God for Bitcoin, that you had obviously a massive part in, and getting that together. So that I want to thank you, number one, for this. This is, I've given this to priests, pastors. I've bought it for a lot of people. So, and I continue to do so. So thank you, number one, for that. I have not told you that actually, and I just thought about it actually. So thank you for this. Amazing. In saying that, and this is a very easy, you wrote this with a number of other people, for people that are really of all ages, it doesn't matter. This is a great book to get into, to kind of, just really wet your whistle into the Bitcoin space and just why fiat destroys things. So this book, Fiat Ruins Everything, tell us where the genesis, where this came from, kind of how maybe it came off of this, maybe ideas that you had. And I know we were in some spaces the other day and you talked about really this one kind of more for Bitcoiners. Like, again, this one I love for people that aren't into Bitcoin yet and they're just learning about what's going on. So tell us like the genesis of Fiat Ruins Everything, and how it came about and why it's geared towards Bitcoiners.
Yeah, so this is my fifth book now, and generally the other books that I've had have been to get people into Bitcoin. So the first one was for programmers that weren't into Bitcoin, to get them to learn about the underneath stuff, the protocol essentially, and I wrote a book for that. The second book, Little Bitcoin book, it was for people that were interested in human rights and getting them into Bitcoin. The third one is Thank God for Bitcoin, and that was to get Christians into Bitcoin. Bitcoin and the American Dream was the next one, and that was to get people that are more into politics into Bitcoin. This one, I wanted to aim it at Bitcoiners. It's kind of a bear market right now, and a lot of people get a little bit depressed, right? Like it's a bear market, it's hard, and you have to save a lot, and I wanted to rally the troops a little bit. But the actual genesis of the book was taking David Perel's course. So he wrote the foreword for this book. I took his course, Rite of Passage, and after taking that course, I felt really empowered to write about whatever and however much quantity I needed to. And I approached Bitcoin Magazine after taking the course, and I was like, hey, I want to have like a regular column, and it'd be sort of along these lines of how fiat ruins a particular thing. And they got excited about it, and I wrote a bunch of articles that basically ended up in the book. And I did that for I don't know, I want to say like 6 or 7 months or so. And it was like at first weekly, then bi-weekly, then like monthly. But I got out a lot of articles, and I wanted to collate them at some point into a book. And I had started my year-long Bitcoin sabbatical, as I like to call it. I took my kids out of school. We went and traveled the world, and saw a bunch of things. And I went to a lot of different Bitcoin meetups and talked to a lot of people in different countries about what's going on there. And a lot of that made it into the book as well. But so the book was a solo effort, and that's not something that I've done since the first book that I wrote. So it was it's also longer than all my other books. So it was a fun experience, and yeah, it was aimed at Bitcoiners to help them be more convicted in their Bitcoining, I guess.
It's funny you say that, because I was just watching, I don't know if it's new or not, but it's the rise and the rise of Bitcoin documentary. It was like on YouTube or whatever. It was a
Mhm.
really
Mhm.
good. It was a guy, I forget, I can't remember his name now, but I just watched it this week, and it was
Mhm.
basically him going back and mining in early 2010s and stuff like that, and all this history up to like 2015 or so, something like that. And
Mhm.
it was really good. But you see a lot of people, as you know, being in the
Mhm.
space like you have, that fall away, and there's not many
Mhm.
books that keep people
Mhm.
convicted and really
Mhm.
understanding, hey, why are we in this game? You see the likes of Roger
Mhm.
Ver, all these guys are in, or gals, and then they fall away from the space, or they get sucked out, Vitalik or whatever it is, and they get
Mhm.
sucked out for varying reasons. And I've seen you on stage many times. I mentioned the space the other day. You're not afraid to mix it up on
Mhm.
stage, and call some of those gentlemen out, and other people that fall away, and they all have their
Mhm.
own reasons, and whatever it is, and excuses or whatever. But um, can you talk about some of what you talk about in the book, obviously what you write about, and why it's
Mhm.
so important that people understand, again, what fiat is versus what Bitcoin is, and in simple terms, I guess, but also how you write about it and why it is so important. It is the game. It is the greatest game, right? So can you
Mhm.
could you go into that, and kind of how you laid out the book, and how you structured it? Hey, really quick, I want to annoy the hell out of you with a quick little break to just remind you that we have to share the signal within the noise, because the algorithms hate truth. The algorithm hates truth. So we have to do all that we can to spread the signal. The faster we do that, the quicker change comes to the world. We need to be the change we seek to be. What are we doing? What am I doing? What are you doing to build a future? Also, if you want a written version of a lot of what we do here, please go to the description and find the link to our blog, our Substack, as well as you will see many links to either the work or the companies, the places you can find all the playable characters here that we talk to, and how you can connect with them. So now back to the show. Thank you.
Yeah, so the way I structured it is to show basically first that fiat money is evil in so many different ways, and it debases a lot of things that we hold dear. And then I look at the incentives at varying levels. So starting at the individual level, we don't have a savings vehicle, so that has consequences all over our lives. Then we get to the company level, and how our employment is organized. It used to be that people used to sell stuff to lots of different people. Most people these days sell their labor to a single entity, and that is not a coincidence. That is something that sort of emerges out of fiat money, because essentially you get a winner take all dynamic, and these corporations grow huge. And you can kind of see it in the economy today. Almost every industry, there's like 4 or 5 big players, and then like niche players that eventually go bankrupt or get acquired or something like that. And then at the nation state level, there's a whole bunch of consequences as a result of the government essentially being able to print money. Largely, this means that there's a lot of rent seeking, a lot of unnecessary stuff, a lot of justifications for spending money that don't really make that much sense, but do anyway. And then finally, at the global level, the world is under a dollar hegemony, and that is an artifact of World War II and just sort of the industrial capacity that the United States had at that time. But that has meant that the globe is dominated in many ways by the United States and has been for quite some time. That stuff is starting to crumble a little bit. Um, with regard to your question about all those people that have fallen away, the general pattern is that a lot of these people didn't understand what Bitcoin was for in the first place. They were fortunate enough to sort of get into Bitcoin fairly early, and they kind of delude themselves into thinking that they were the reason why Bitcoin was successful. And the two people that you mentioned, Vitalik Buterin and Roger Ver, are prime examples. But it's not just them. I had a Tone Vays has this whole thing about how many people like kind of that he knew back in 2013 when he got his start, and how every single non-technical person from that era has since gone over to an altcoin or endorsed something else. They've essentially, as you say, fallen away. The temptation to go to something else is enormous. The incentives for that are enormous, because if you do go and found a new coin, you're essentially able to print money. It's about the most fiat thing imaginable. And a lot of people fall into that. They like being able to print their own money. And so what if you have to lie, steal, cheat, and defraud? They don't seem to care that much, largely because they're smart enough to rationalize their actions, right? And that's the tragedy of the human condition, is that we're not rational creatures, we're rationalizing creatures, and we like making justifications for whatever bad behavior that we are engaging in. And that's unfortunately the case for a lot of these people, VCs, altcoin founders, a lot of the media, a lot of people that are in these quote unquote communities and so on. I mean, we've obviously seen stuff like that with BitBoy and Do Kwon and Alex Mashinsky and Sam Bankman-Fried. Like this is the temptation that you get into, is you can have sound money with Bitcoin, or you can be Fiat 2.0 and print your own money and make a lot. Of course, you're taking a lot of risk doing that, but this is the high time preference behavior that fiat money has encouraged for over a generation now.
I mean, all I can think of is like gambling, casino, dopamine rush, like what in your opinion, what do you think, separates, not that men from the boys, I don't know if that's the right analogy, but what separates, I think, maybe two different people who are seeing something so long term versus people that are, like you said, they're into this, like, hey, I want this dopamine hit, I can just go spin up a new coin. I mean, like you said, I mean, you were very knowledgeable in that world, programming and doing all that stuff. You could very easily go spin up 100 coins a year and make a killing, right? So what makes you different, or people like us versus those people that have fallen away, or they're just addicted to the NFTs or whatever? And what in your mind kind of separates people?
Yeah, great question. And I'll give you a little bit of a biblical analogy. There's the wide gate and the narrow gate. The wide gate is, entering through for the gambling, the altcoins, the airdrops, all of that stuff, the monkey JPEGs or whatever. And it's the gate that most people enter through because they're interested in rent seeking. They want to make money for doing nothing. And that's actually the second to last chapter in the book is the wrong lessons of Pizza Day, right? And that's become something of a meme, something of like a time traveling fantasy for a lot of people, because for them, that is the ultimate good fortune like thing that they would like to fall into, is being able to buy 10,000 Bitcoin back in 2010 and just sit on it, having not provided any value whatsoever, but benefiting from from one brilliant trade, basically. And what I argue in that chapter is that that is the wrong lesson, because that is extremely fiat, right? It is, I made money doing nothing. I provided no value or good or service or to anybody. Whereas the other side of the trade, Laszlo, who actually, you know, bought the 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin, was actually an innovator. He coded, he knew some GPU programming. So he was one of the early GPU mining people. And the reason why he had so much Bitcoin was because he figured out how to use GPUs to hash faster. And that essentially secured the network better. It eventually led to more people mining on GPUs, securing the network that way. And which eventually led to FPGAs and even ASICs. That was a real innovation. That was a good or service or something that was provided. Very few people dream of being Laszlo. Most people dream of being the guy that bought the 10,000 Bitcoin. And that's the flaw there, is that there is a fiat mentality of wanting to rent seek, of getting something for nothing. And that is the wrong mentality, in my opinion. And that's the wide gate. That's what people want to do. Now, what's the narrow gate? The narrow gate is actually learning about money. What is money? What is the system? What is fiat money? How does it work? And why would I want to stay in there? And what are the moral implications and so on? And the people that stay in Bitcoin have entered through the narrow gate. The people that don't have entered through the wide gate, because they don't really understand Bitcoin. And the thing is, it takes a long time to enter through the narrow gate. It is a very long and hard road. Even the smartest people that have entered through the narrow gate, and I'm thinking here of people like Russell Kuhn, Nayib Bukele, Michael Saylor, it still took them many months to get through the narrow gate.
Yeah.
And they studied it exclusively and they got it, but it still took them months, which tells you something about how difficult it is. For most people, it takes years. I know it did for me. And
Same.
like learning what it is, how it works, all of that is a multi-year process. And this notion that you to get adoption, you just need to airdrop some things or whatever. Like I said, people are very good at rationalizing stuff, right? And if you enter through the wide gate, you'll rationalize the heck out of whatever it is that you're doing. Oh yeah, it's fine to launch an altcoin. It's gonna do this, or this, and I'm giving the market what it wants or whatever, and they don't think about any of the actual consequences of their actions and justify it in whatever capacity that they can. And that's the real difference.
I love that you say that, and I know you briefly mentioned that the other day when we were doing spaces, and I love that analogy because it's better than it's similar to what I always say to people, but it's a better way to say it and using the biblical version of it. And it's just, I always use like the gauntlet. It's just like I always, not that Bitcoiners are smarter than anyone else or whatever. So we just went through the gauntlet before many other people did at this point in life, obviously. So you have to take your bumps and bruises. We've taken our lumps, and that's why we're here now. We've gone through those experiences, and that's why. So I think that's what's important for people to realize. It's not like we woke up out of bed one day and just said, hey, Bitcoin, I had a vision from God and Bitcoin's it. Like we like I'm a genius. It's different. It's very different. And I know my path of 10, 12 years, seeing the '08 crash, graduating from Michigan State University and being a senior when it crashed.
Oh, you're a Spartan? I didn't know that.
I am. Yes.
I'm a Wolverine, just so you know. But we can still be friends.
Yeah, I know. Hey, in a month or two, we have the big the game coming up. So
okay.
But yeah, no, I played hockey for MSU. So
okay. Wow.
Yep. So earlier today, I was actually putting on my schedule of when they play. MSU and U of M play each other in January. I'm going to try to hit the game. So neither here nor there, but that's a talk for offline. But anyway, you have to go through the gauntlet, and so that wide gate and the narrow gate, I think, is so huge, and understanding truly what that is. In saying that, what are
hmm
some of the topics you kind of hit on in the book? Because
hmm
I love, again, I love your book. I think I said this the other day, but I love your book because it strikes a chord with me. My journey, like I said, kind of going through,
hmm
going to gold and silver, learning real estate, being
hmm
in the real estate, but for 10 years. And it took me a long
hmm
time because I understood all the principles of Bitcoin, but didn't get introduced till 2016, 17, started investing in
hmm
2018 and not, probably didn't really understand it till 2020-ish when government started locking things down and really like clicked, like, okay, yeah, I got it here.
hmm
So anyway, it's what are some of the topics you kind of hit where fiat is destroying those things, and people, like, again, whether Bitcoiners or average person might not really put two and two together, because everything to me,
hmm
everything always comes back to hard money versus soft money, basically. So what
hmm
kind of some of those topics, give a little preview, I guess, of what's it in there that you
hmm
hit?
Yeah, so let's start with one, and this is the lowering of birth rates all over the world, right? And this is happening everywhere. And I visited Korea earlier this year, lowest birth rate in the world
Wow.
at 0.78 babies per woman, right? Which
Wow.
you need at least 2.1 to sustainably, keep a population.
Growing. Yeah.
0.78 is insanely low. What's even worse, the city of Seoul and the surrounding suburbs, which have about half of the Korean population, it's 0.6, which if you calculate
Wow.
out like 4 generations, so for every 100 great grandparents, you end up with about 6 great grandchildren, which is
Wow.
crazy. That
That's
is like
can't
demographic
brain can't. Yeah.
death. like,
Your
like
brain can't even handle that. Like, that's wild.
Yeah. So what is going on, and how does fiat money come into this? Well, first of all, most families now, especially in places like Korea, both parents have to work. Why is that? Well, there's so much rent seeking, so much government spending, so much inflation, so much stuff that you need, that if both parents aren't working, you're not able to make ends meet. So as a result, if you have both parents working, well, who's going to take care of the kids? And you need to put them in daycare or something like that. And at that point, you're gonna top out at 2, right? Even if you want like 6, 7, 8 kids, you're not gonna be able to do more than 2. So that's one aspect of it, which is fairly obvious, that okay, women, it used to be about a third of women used to work. Now it's way more than that, and that means less children. Just like
Yeah.
statistically,
Law of numbers.
that's
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
happen. All right. All right. Second thing. All right. Real estate. And this is something that you're probably a little bit more familiar with, but real estate has a giant store of value premium. Now, why is that? That's because whenever new money enters into the economy, people want to store their value, right? And there
Yeah.
aren't very good stores of value in the economy. In fact, there's only 2 that you can really point to besides Bitcoin. I guess you can call gold a store of value in the same vein, but you have stocks and you have real estate. That's it. Those are it. And unsurprisingly, those are where like a lot of rich people are made, right? Like if you look at the past
Does.
50 years, and the richest people that have made the most money, like a large number of them come from either real estate or some sort of financial services industry. So you have this premium, and so people don't own stocks to get dividends anymore. They own stocks because of the price appreciation and being able to keep up with the inflation that's actually happening. Similar thing with real estate. People don't necessarily buy to keep to live in a house. It's to store their value. I read a statistic about the high-end apartments in Manhattan, right? Some of the most desirable real estate in the world, and something like 60% of them are vacant. Why? Because there's so much of a demand for these things, and rich people know, if I own one of these, that they're scarce enough that they'll go up in value. And in fact, this explains a significant amount of why real estate prices are just so crazy, especially in Asia. Not only do you have very little land, but Asian culture is such that that the store of value premium, or the association of real estate and store of value is so strong that these things get bid up like crazy. In fact, in China, for example, you have entire ghost cities of apartments that no
Yeah.
one has ever lived in. But the store of value demand for real estate is so high that they build stuff where no one lives. That's how bad it's gotten. And so real estate is very expensive because of the store value premium. Instead of living in it, people use it as an investment vehicle, as a way to keep up with inflation. So what happens then? Well, if you are anywhere in the world, you know that real estate is very expensive. And if you want a big family, you're going to need a big house. Well, you can't afford a big house anymore. Why? Because the people that are buying the big houses are the ones that are using it as an investment vehicle. So it crowds out the people that want to use it for its utility because it has a secondary function as a store of value. And of course, that means that people are going to have less babies because they can't afford it. And that's just one of the many ways in which fiat ruins a lot of stuff. But this is, this is why you have lower birth rates all over the world. The store of value premium, the fact that women have to work, and you get kind of crazy incentives all over the place where people don't want to necessarily have large families because they feel like they can't afford it. Too many things are expensive, and the future is so uncertain because we're under fiat money, and you don't know what the government's going to do with respect to the money. So that means that you're going to need more money in savings to feel more secure and have more babies, essentially. So you get low birth rates almost everywhere.
Do you think that we will look back, maybe decades from now? I mean, it could even be 10, 20 years from now, but decades from now, as this is kind of like a dark ages we were living through, even though it seemed so like fiat bringing this prosperity really the last, I guess, call it 110 years, really, since the Federal Reserve, but really maybe 50, 60, 70 years of this really like kind of just parabolic since 64, 71, Bank Secrecy Act, right? All that, silver coming on the coins, and then 71, obviously. Do you think we'll look back and realize like, wow, we were actually like living through a dark ages that we could have been, 1,000, 10,000 times beyond that if we would have just had hard money, and just been in that world. I can't help but thinking in a way we look back and be like, wow, we robbed ourselves of all the children we've murdered, or and on and on and on. You just kind of alluded to a lot of it in a way where people couldn't even, or people that didn't come into existence, the human beings, because it's like, well, I can't have a family because I can't save. I mean, when you look back decades from now, I can't help but feeling that people will just be like aghast at like what we were doing, truly.
Yeah. And that's not even touching on all of the other stuff for the people that actually exist. I mean,
Oh boy.
think about the academic industrial complex and all of
Oh,
the useless research that is going on there that don't have any connection to reality. It's just all this talent just completely wasted. The human capital that exists. I mean, let's not even talk about the human capital that never came into existence as a result of low birth rates, but even the human capital that exists, a significant portion ends up in rent-seeking positions that aren't contributing anything. And you contrast like the 19th century to the 20th century, and like the innovations that we got in the 19th century, with all of the individuals that were essentially conquering the West. And the Erie Canal was completely privately funded, for example. And
wild.
all of this stuff that happened back then, with the advent of railroads and oil usage and stuff like that. Like those were some significant innovations. Whereas 20th century, with way more people, we had less as fiat started taking over. And indeed, like things are starting to go backwards. And this is something that I point out in the book. You look at, for example, like travel times between New York and London. And right now, to go from New York to London takes longer than it did in the 60s. What the heck happened, right? What's
Wow.
going on? Well, there's a lot of regulatory stuff, but Essentially, the airline industry has completely ossified. And this is because of fiat money. See, when you have fiat money, there is a winner take all dynamic. And the reason is because the larger you are, the more access you have to newly printed money. So if you're a very large company, then you have access to the commercial bond market at very favorable rates, which mean that you have access to lots of money and you can bring consumption forward through debt and you can crush your competitors. Because if you're a large company and you have a lot of small competitors and you have this giant money advantage, you have access to these loans that they don't, well, you can, one, underprice them. Two, you can outscale them. Three, you can buy them outright. And four, you can hire away their best people, right? Because you can, and these are all strategies that various companies have employed. So Facebook and Google use that like hiring away strategy, right? They pay more than everybody else. So they hoard all of the best engineers, although not so much right now because interest rates are higher. And Amazon and Walmart have underpriced everybody. Even if they're losing money, they don't really care. They want to destroy the other smaller competitors. And lots of companies have acquired smaller companies through the debt leverage that they're able to have. So you get this dynamic where the large companies get larger and the small companies get wiped out. So you get in almost every industry 4 or 5 giant companies, and that's the same for airlines, right? So once you have that pseudo monopoly, or it's not exactly a monopoly, I guess it's like a quintopoly or whatever. Then what you can do is you can collude and you can get regulations passed on your behalf. So you get an organization like the FAA, which essentially protects the people that are at the top, right? The companies that are at the top, and they make it very difficult to create new types of aircraft that could possibly go much faster. In fact, the airline or airplane manufacturing industry, there's only really 2 in the entire world. It's Boeing and Airbus. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you got smaller ones like Cessna and many others, but like the commercial airplane industry, like there were way more earlier than but because of fiat you get this consolidation. And the original 747 took like 2 years to manufacture, or from concept to manufacture. The latest one, the 747 Max or something like that, it took like 10 years. It's a lot of regulation, a lot of loss of human capital. A lot of people don't know how to do a lot of this stuff. You don't have a lot of smart people in this stuff anymore because, they're selling monkey JPEGs in a Web3 startup or something like that, or working at an investment bank to do 100x leverage on an FX trade, right? Like that's the stuff where like all the smart people went instead of airplane manufacturing. So you get all of these horrible incentives, and next thing you know, we have worse air travel times between New York and London than we did 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And dishwashers are similar. That's another one that I point out. Like in the 60s, dishwasher ran for 45 minutes and got all your dishes sparkling clean. How much does your dishwasher, or how long does your dishwasher take? Probably 3 hours, 3.5 hours. And you probably have spots afterwards. Well, what's going on? Well, there are all sorts of regulations about how much energy it can use, how much water it can use. So of course they work much worse. So we're actually going backwards. So your comment about the dark ages or the decline is very much true, right? Things have been getting worse. We're getting stupider. We're doing dumber stuff. We're not progressing, and that I don't know if you got to watch the book trailer, but we were projecting in the 60s we're gonna have moon bases, and we're gonna have flights that took 45 minutes from New York to LA or something like that, and all this other stuff. None of that came to pass because everything got ossified. And this is the dirty secret of fiat money, is that it ossifies everything because it keeps the people in power instead of creative destruction, instead of market competition, instead of consumer preferences. You are able to put your thumb on the scale with fiat money and keep alive these zombie companies, these companies that are not innovating at all, and instead and sacrifice innovation essentially, and the frontier. And this is the real reason why we're going backwards.
Boy, I'm gonna replay that many times. That was, you just summed up, I think, everything that's going on in the world. Holy cow! I think of like Liberty Safe, we're going on right now, and you see like the arm of all these, the ossification, and then you see the centralization, the monopolization, and you referred to all those things there of what's going on. And you start realizing, oh, the media, there's a couple of people that own all the different media outlets, and you just alluded to all that. You have Liberty Safe, looking like it was owned by someone or a hedge fund or someone else, sold out, bought out by people who could care less about your freedoms, and selling the very thing that they don't even care about. And that is fiat in a nutshell. It is mind blowing what is going on, and how I think that. And talk to me about this a little bit. Actually, this is I just thought of this, but one of the things that scares me the most, actually, out of anything, one is brain drain, obviously, like leaving. But hey, we're global, and you care about all human beings, so brain drain from America. Okay, it is what it is. But at the end of the day, when you keep going down this road of and I want to touch on this in a bit here too, which is just Marxism, cultural Marxism, which I know is something that not everyone talks about, postmodernism, which I know you have good knowledge on. But you have this world when we have people that believe in that, whether it's Fabianist, Marxist, or whoever it is, and they are there and they are hell-bent Malthusians on really destroying life, destroying the world, just so they can control whatever's left, or whatever their plan, whatever their plan is, I guess. What you get to a certain point where you can't go back. Like 10 years from now, if we destroy everything, the manufacturing, the infrastructure, and then we say, oh, didn't work, let's go back. You don't just like flip the switch back off, because everything is shut down, everything's gone, everything is grown over, everything's rusted out. Maybe just extrapolate on that a little bit, because I know you've probably given thought to that over time as well. I've heard you mention talk about stuff like that over time, but it's not talked about very much, I guess. And that's why again, I love your writings and some of the things you do, because you're a very deep thinker, and you go into these realms where you don't get it. Like if you just go into spaces, people aren't talking about that necessarily, stuff like that. So give me some of your thoughts on that, because it's not talked about very much. And that's something that really is a true threat if we keep letting this game play out, this fiat game, ruining everything 5, 10, 15 years down the line. There's no going back.
Yeah. So let's talk about decline a little bit, and how that sort of manifests itself, because in a sense, no civilization thinks they're on the decline, right? It's like, oh yeah, like things are horrible or whatever. And I make an argument in the book, maybe in 1969, when we landed on the moon, that was the peak of our civilization. Because in a way, like, what the heck have we done since then? We haven't pushed the frontier at all. And we haven't been back to the moon, right? Like we just stopped going, and they keep talking about it. It's like, oh, like we're not going back because it's too expensive or something. It's like, well, maybe we just sort of lost the ability, and we don't know what we're doing anymore, and we started to look inward and stuff. And if you study sort of the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, the Eastern Romans like actually had some sound money, so they managed to stick around as the Byzantine Empire until like 1400 or 1500. But if you study the collapse of Rome, what you find is that like they built like these amazing architectural structures. So the Colosseum, I think, was like 70 AD, 80 AD, the Pantheon, like 110 AD and stuff like that. What's absolutely remarkable about those two buildings in Rome are that they were built in 10 years, right? 10 years.
Incredible.
The highway that connects Dallas to Austin, I-35, I swear that thing's been under construction for more than 10 years, right? Like, how the heck did they do it in 10 years without modern machinery and all this other stuff? Well, it turns out that like after they started debasing money, especially under Diocletian, they lost all of the knowledge on how to build that stuff. Like the original Colosseum used to have a retractable roof, which is crazy if you think about it, right? Like they had
Incredible.
this thing that would go out and then retract back. And it got so bad that the reason why the Colosseum looks the way it does is because they wanted the marble, right? Instead of going and actually mining the marble and getting new ones, they were like, let's just take it from this thing, this nice building, and use it to go build other stuff. And of course, their knowledge on how to build like giant domes and things like that they have in the Pantheon, it went away. So you can see the buildings get worse, like 300, 400, and like a lot of those buildings don't exist anymore because the knowledge and the expertise kind of went away. I suspect that's happening right now, right? Like how many people actually like know how to build a nuclear reactor anymore, right? Like, I mean, there's maybe a handful, but like if we're not careful, we're gonna have to rediscover a lot of this stuff. Of course, we have like really good records and writing, and like getting back to it.
There's more tech to keep it with. Yeah, fortunately.
Yeah. Fortunately, we'll be able to do that, but I mean, nuclear power has definitely gone backwards. It's crazy to me that, in the 1950s, they created the nuclear submarine, right? Which if you don't know how it works, it's crazy. Right. You don't have to fuel it for 18 months, right? There's no fueling of a nuclear submarine. The fuel is there, and you can ride around for 18 months and not have to refuel.
It's just the people that limit it, right? It's just the humans that limit it.
And think about that, right? Like, why don't we have cars that run on nuclear energy that we don't ever need to go to the gas station or recharge or whatever? What the heck happened, right? Science fiction writers from that era were projecting that out and saying, we're going to have planes that don't need jet fuel and cars but nope, didn't happen, right? Like that's something that got completely shut down by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Nuclear power plants used to take 2 years to build. They now take like 15 years now.
Yeah,
it's gone backwards. And a lot of that is because of this need to essentially ossify the economy, and that's the dynamic of fiat money. Now, I want to touch on something else that you said, and that's the whole cultural Marxism aspect, and actually dive pretty deep into it in the chapter on how fiat debases families, and I'll give you a little bit of a preview on that, but a lot of this comes from the Frankfurt School. And if you're not familiar with the Frankfurt School, they're the ones that came up with something called critical theory. And critical theory is the ancestor of a lot of stuff that you might be familiar with now. Critical race theory, queer theory, a lot of intersectionality and all that stuff that's very prominent in leftist politics. So it all comes from essentially the Frankfurt School. So what was the Frankfurt School? The Frankfurt School were a bunch of Marxists, and they kind of had a big problem because according to Marx, and this is all sort of asserted by Marx without any evidence whatsoever, but he said that the progress of humanity goes from feudalism to capitalism to socialism to communism. That's what he said, right? Like you'll see these things. He didn't give any evidence where he just said this is what's going to happen. So the condition, he's like, we're already at capitalism. Okay, so when do we get to socialism? And he said, all right, capitalism is going to fail in a spectacular way, and people will become class conscious, right? Realize that they are the oppressed, And because they'll be class conscious, there will be a violent revolution, and that will usher in socialism. This is Marxist doctrine as described by Marx. And what was the problem? Well, in the 20s and 30s in particular, there were these giant economic failures, right? So for the Marxists, it was seeing the hyperinflation in the Weimar Republic, hyperinflation in Austria and Hungary, the Great Depression in the United States. All of that was clearly capitalism failing on a massive scale. All right. So, all right. Class consciousness, we're gonna see socialism, right? Wrong. In fact, that didn't happen at any of these places. So they had to come up with some theoretical framework for why that didn't happen. So they were searching for some explanation, essentially, on why Marx was still right. Right? They were trying to rationalize why Marx was still right because his prediction didn't come true. So what's going on? And they took a little bit of writing from Marx, who said that the family was one of the ways in which you are not going to be able to see reality, right? Like it gives something like a false consciousness. And they also took the writings of Freud about sort of like the attachment that you have to your family. And they came up with critical theory, which essentially posits that you need to be you need to be awakened through education, right? The class consciousness doesn't come on its own. It needs to be sort of instilled in you, and a large part of that is essentially breaking off of the family bonds that you have in order to really understand that you are oppressed, because family bonds give you a false consciousness, and you need to be awakened to the real oppression that is happening to you. And only then would you get the violent revolution that leads to socialism and so on. So a lot of the language around that should sound familiar because it exists today. The idea of woke is it's actually kind of a Marxist socialist term. It's being awakened to your oppression, right? The fact that you are being oppressed, and that's where the word comes from. Now it's kind of been twisted a little bit and co-opted by especially people on the right saying, oh, you're so woke, and that just means that you're really liberal and do crazy things. But really, from a socialist perspective, this is what it means. It's you're not conscious of the class oppression that you have. So based on that, they and I described this in the chapter. What happened was they started to attack the family pretty directly, and that was the beginning of a lot of stuff that eventually ended up with a lot of the stuff that's in like the Black Lives Matter movement, for example. Yep. Right? They're very anti-family. It comes all the way from the 30s with the Frankfurt School, and what happened around that time was that all of the communists in that era were reporting to Moscow. The USSR had something called the Comintern, Communist International, and like these essentially international conferences of communists flying into Moscow to meet and talk about that stuff. And you had people like Ho Chi Minh and Mao Zedong like all fly into Moscow to discuss like how to bring about like a communist workers' paradise. So they had a lot of people in that organization, or they had essentially people trying to penetrate a lot of organizations in the United States. And a communist operative famously said that we only need like 1% of an organization's voting power to be communist, and we can get our people into leadership. That's how good they were at doing that. And in particular, they targeted, at least three, U.S. organizations. One was the media, one was academia, um, and media, academia, and the third one was Hollywood. So all three of these places have very Marxist leanings, and have for a very long time, in part because of sort of the communist subversion that happened from then. And it's not a surprise that all three of those are very anti-family, and that's a large part of like why culturally we've turned away from family and tried to do a lot of this, or like why it seems so insane, like the policies and stuff, because in essence all three of those eventually ended up taking over the left side of the Democratic Party, and it's become government policy to a large degree. And here we are. I mean, it's not a coincidence. A lot of this is very Marxist, and fiat money also is Marxist. It's the fifth plank of the Communist Manifesto: complete control of money by the government. And this is what we've gotten.
I love that you refer to the Frankfurt School again, something that obviously not taught in government-run schools here in America. So very few people know. And I'm on this kick of we can't call it public schools; they're government-run schools. We have to change that language, and because it's from the Frankfurt School, and most people, most teachers are great people, right? They don't even know they're communist, right? They've just been fed this line for decades, and it emanates from the Frankfurt School. And again, very little talk, even in the Bitcoin world, about this. So I think it's that education. So I love that you write about it in this book, because it's like in my blog and my channel, we'll talk about it and things like that. But more and more people, it just has to get out there. So I absolutely love that you are writing about it, putting that out there.
What's really scary is that it's penetrated the church. Which is crazy. Yeah. And the communist operative said that the easiest people to get to our cause are liberal Christians, and this was in the 30s. And it's been the case throughout. And I've had I used to donate to Campus Crusade and stuff like that. And I saw this one video where they were talking about Black Lives Matter. I'm like, okay, not happening anymore. I had to stop supporting them. And I had some dialogue with them during that time, trying to figure out what's going on. And they were arguing that critical race theory was something that they should study, which was, what are you talking about? Really? Like these are two atheists, like, people that essentially created the Frankfurt School. It's Marx and Freud, like the two most atheist people in the last 200 years that have. I mean, you add Nietzsche to that, and that's pretty much the trifecta. But like that was incredibly scary, seeing that's how a lot of these organizations are now going. But yeah,
it's again, I can't help but coming back to the fiat ruining everything, right, and opening this door for this. But it's the chaos agent, right? I mean, the evil one works in all these ways, and like you just mentioned, these organizations, churches, many people, so many good people. It's fiat to me weaponizes your attention, and shrinks our attention span, like you just mentioned, higher time preference. And it weaponizes compassion. I think that's what Marxism did. That's what fiat does. And like you said, it's a plank. Fiat is a plank truly of communism and Marxism. And it's weaponizing your compassion. 95 to 99% of people are great people, decent, honest human beings. And it takes that compassion and empathy we have as humans and weaponizes it and turns it back onto us. And like you said, these people don't even know what they're getting into, because they're just like, okay, like I believe you, handshake, and there we go. And then the evil one's there, the chaos agent's there, and like, okay, thank you, I've got your soul, I've got whatever, now I've got my in, or whatever it is. So man, I love that you're talking about this more, because it's something that fiat ruins everything. This, for Bitcoiners, people that are in this is why it's so important. It's why it's so important to read this and get it out there, because we in this cause have to know what we're fighting for. I think of George Washington, right, or Thomas
Mm-hmm.
Paine writing, like, why are we fighting, right? Or what are
Mm-hmm.
we doing? And the common sense and
Mm-hmm.
the time to try men's souls, those pamphlets that he wrote back then, and why are we fighting? What are we doing this for? I mean, it seems pretty crazy. What are we doing this
Mm-hmm.
for? So I love that you're doing that, because it's huge. Have you read like The Naked Communist or anything, or obviously the Communist Manifesto, but like The Naked
Mm-hmm.
Communist, they go through the 45 planks, which they read into public record or congressional record like in the 50s or 60s. Like, here's what we're going to do to usurp America, and it obviously goes through all
Mm-hmm.
this, usurp the family and traditional values and the church and all these, Hollywood. And they're there. They've done like all, or 44 of the 45, I think, as of whatever. Might be all 45.
I haven't read that book, but I
Oh
probably
man,
should.
you'd love it.
The thing to realize is that it is all enabled by fiat money, because in a market-driven, free market, merit-based system, none of these ideas get out past past any sort of rational thought. You need government subsidies to essentially push this onto the market, because it cannot win. It would not win in a fair meritocratic market, and that's the real tragedy of fiat money, is that you can put the thumb on the scale, and you can essentially hire chaos agents that go around and do whatever it is that they want to do, or on their behalf. And this is very common in the fiat world, where the government or the people in power will subsidize the things that are best for them. And for them, like, they might not even be Marxists, but they push Marxist things because it will give them more control. And they want more control so that they can do whatever it is that they want, usually something depraved, or embezzling money or something like that. But ultimately, these are the incentives at play here, to keep everything the same, and undermine anything that might be a threat to their power. And that's unfortunately been the calling card of every government in the world right now. Basically, they use fiat money as a way to keep their power, and you get very weird incentives that essentially end up taking away our freedom and our property and our self-sovereignty.
Boy. And I know we'll wrap here soonish, 5-10 minutes. Be cognizant of your time. This is, gosh, you could just talk for hours and hours about this stuff. I was mentioning the other day too, I think in space, but I was talking to my family this weekend. We were talking about, we mentioned, sports earlier, obviously hockey and stuff like that, and talking about our colleges. And I look at sports and how fiat's ruined sports. With amateur sports, people like, children, their parents living vicariously through their children, like, oh, he's gonna make it, he's gonna get a scholarship, he's gonna, make it pro, ruin pro sports. To me, like, all the salary cap is just socialism, sports socialism, things like that, where you have this world, you're trying to make parity and make everyone equal, and sports gambling now and betting, and now the contracts are so insane, the TV deals, and they're just, it's just everything's just kind of seeping through the system, where it's like the game. Again, I love hockey. I love how it was played, in the 90s when I was growing up and watching it, and there was physicality and there was fighting, and now it's all gone. In the NFL, it's hard to watch sometimes, because it's like, well, you can't touch a quarterback because the guy's worth so much money, no one will watch. And it's like, what are we doing here at the end of the day? Like, why are you playing this sport for dollars? Why are we gambling and betting on all these things, and like making different rules to the game and doing different things just to placate to fiat, the almighty dollar, in essence, the almighty fiat currencies? And that to me is wild. What do you think, in saying all that? You can lay out all these facts, like you're the book, you're writing books about it. You can talk about this with your family, and like, guys, look, we live these things, we see how it's changed. What keeps people? Because like, to me, 6-pack abs is way harder. It
Mhm.
takes a year, 2 years, a lot of change in your psyche and everything, in your body, commitment. That's hard to do. But like getting to like, oh, I'm going to use the hardest money on earth and just save. That takes 1 second. It's the decision, and I'm not going to use your garbage Fiat anymore. Why do
Mhm.
people, in the face of these facts, in logic,
Mhm.
unfortunately,
Mhm.
how does their emotion still get detached from this and say, well, well, this and that, Brandon, well, this and that, Jimmy, I'm still not going to do
Mhm.
that. Government's going to do this. What is this difference that keeps people, even in the face of all like a billion facts, there's nothing good about government currencies? Why do people still do this? It just blows me away.
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and I think it
It's a
harkens
big
back
question.
to sort of the initial thing that we were talking about, and that's this idea of what gets Bitcoiners into Bitcoin. And one of the more underrated things is that to take the narrow road requires a lot of virtue, and that's not something that a lot of people have. You're tempted away to an altcoin, you're tempted away to a higher salary here, or you'll get an airdrop here or something like that. uh, Most people don't have the conviction or the moral fortitude to go and do these things, do the right thing. And in particular for the no coiner that's sort of refusing to come into Bitcoin, some of that is just courage, right? Like they value sort of the status that they have among their friends, and if they start advocating for Bitcoin, they know they're going to be like made fun of or something, or be knocked down the totem pole. And one of the things I point out in the book is that in a fiat economy, politics means everything, because everything is zero sum. So you end up in these weird status games a lot of time, and that's what a lot of fiat jobs end up being. Is, well, to get to the C-suite, you have to play this political game and all this other stuff. And I call a lot of these CEOs actually political officers. They're not really running companies per se. They're just sort of taking the lead from BlackRock or Vanguard or something like that, and doing whatever it is that they want. So a lot of why people aren't getting into Bitcoin is I don't think they have the moral fortitude, or even if and a bunch of them just are kind of nihilistic at the core anyway. And that's I would argue that fiat money is like a very atheist money. It's like we create our own reality kind of money, instead of submitting to the reality
Truth.
that we already
Yeah.
have. um so a lot of people are, when you live in a totally relative world like that, then like going and doing X is just as good as going and doing Y. So like there's no reason to go with Bitcoin until they show themselves to be the stronger horse. And that's sort of the mentality that a lot of people wait for in a status game is, okay, I'm only going to switch when it's clear that they're winning. So that's unfortunately the mentality of a lot of people, and this is why even if it's right, even if they're convinced that they're right, they won't go through, because for them the more important thing is being in the correct community, being
Like a safe space almost.
esteemed by
Yeah.
their
Yeah.
esteemed by their peers correctly and stuff
Hmm.
like that. So yeah, I think that's the main dynamic at play, and most people are very sensitive to that, because that's what fiat rewards.
Makes me think of and I'll end with a couple kind of quick ones here, but that makes me
Mm-hmm.
think of the American Revolution, like that 3% number of 3% of people that were like, hey, let's go. And everyone
Mm-hmm.
else was like, we're just gonna like wait around and see what happens with you guys. And then people started coming in, as a, or in the Bible, right? Like you have a lot of
Mm-hmm.
these where it's like, well, we forgot God. And the next chapter it was like, we
Mm-hmm.
forgot God again. And then it was the next book, it was like, well, we forgot God again. It's like it's
Mm-hmm.
just like this constant, like you said, kind of wanting to be in the safe group, safe space type of thing. So in saying all that, like a couple kind of quick ones here to finish, what are you most hopeful for, I guess? What are
Mm.
you kind of looking, you travel, El
Mhm.
Salvador, you've been all over. What are you most hopeful for just kind of around the world? Obviously, it doesn't have to be America by any means. So what are you most hopeful
Mhm.
for, just kind of what you see traveling with Bitcoin, with just people innovating and companies forming and people coming to the space? What have you seen that's really kind of piqued your interest?
Yeah, so I'm seeing sort of like a similar pattern in a lot of places, which is that, there is sort of like an initial rush towards an altcoin, right? Well, they discover Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin becomes popular, then altcoins become popular. And then after a while, after people have gotten burned off of altcoins, then Bitcoin starts to emerge again. And these are the people that have gone through the narrow gate, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot more of those people that sort of come in after a while. I think the US is a little bit ahead in that regard. There's more people that are what we would call Bitcoin maximalists in Europe too, but Asia is just starting on that because they came in later. They came in mostly during the 2017 cycle, and I imagine the Middle East will take even longer because that they came in maybe even a little bit towards like 2018 or so. But that's what excites me, is that reality does sort of reassert itself, especially in the space. And the reality is that altcoins are really have a zero intrinsic value, and Bitcoin will continue to get more people through that narrow gate. And that's what's exciting, is that we're winning. It's just taking
Mm-hmm.
longer because it takes people longer to get it.
Do you think that really that parabolic kind of S curve, do you think that kind of
Mhm.
speeds up in the coming years, obviously with more people just seeing that just naturally?
Well, I think number go up will definitely bring in more people, but I suspect that we'll still have another cycle of altcoins and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
where because honestly, people don't have the character to stick with
Yeah.
Bitcoin, and that's happened every cycle. Um, but we will eventually get to the point where people realize, okay, yeah, I've learned my lesson, and enough people realizing that will get towards that Bitcoin adoption that we've been talking about. But I don't think we need to hurry. Let it play out on its own. There are lots of people on Twitter that talk about, oh, we need to increase adoption now and make it seem really urgent. I don't think you do. I think people, you only need to show one person at a time. And honestly, like, it's kind of like evangelizing for me with Christianity. Like, I don't need to
Mm-hmm.
go and try to talk an atheist into Christianity, and I think in
Great
many
point.
ways that's counterproductive.
Yeah.
The people that I want to talk to are already curious, and they're the ones seeking me out because I've basically made it known that I'm a Christian.
Nice.
It's similar with Bitcoin. You're not going to get a Keynesian economist onto Bitcoin. That's not going to happen.
Krugman,
But
big
like,
Krugman in there.
yeah, I mean, if you just let people know that you're into Bitcoin, they're gonna be the ones that seek you out when inevitably, like, they see what's going on or whatever. I'm sure many of your listeners have had that experience where somebody just sort of calls you out of the blue, usually during a bull market. Hey, I heard about this Bitcoin thing, can you tell me more about it? Those are your opportunities, and I think that's how it happens naturally, and not through some coordinated marketing campaign and airdrops and free money and stuff like that those never work.
Oh, well said. Yeah, well said. How long did it take you to put together? Obviously, Think Ever Bitcoin,
Hmm.
came out a few years ago. How
Hmm.
long did it take you to put together the book and kind of write everything and put
Hmm.
it together?
Yeah, so I mean, I started publishing on Bitcoin Magazine, but I took it, I started collating it and turning it into a book in September of last year. And during
Wow.
the year-long trip, I worked on it, and I had basically the final manuscript sometime around May. So yeah, that maybe 6, 7 months, something like that.
Very cool. I know tell me about the crowdfunding really quick as well. Is
Hmm.
that over and done with? Kind of what's the
It
situation with
is.
that right now? Okay.
It is. And we raised like $12,000, and the goal was
Yes.
5,000. So I'm very
Yeah.
happy with how
It's
it
very
went.
cool.
And I used Zappright, which definitely solved a lot of the problems that I had with like collecting and stuff, because you don't know if people want to pay on chain or on
Yeah.
Lightning, or if they just want to spend fiat, then I wanted to provide that option. So yeah, it was, I didn't have to go through Kickstarter, which takes 30% from you, whatever you raise, and so
Yeah.
it was great. I really liked it, and I hope to do more of that stuff in the future as I figure out what other books I need to write.
Yeah. Well, we have one of the last ones, some of the
Hmm.
Bitcoin trading cards. We got a Mount Gox one
Nice.
here,
Uh-huh.
Mother Satoshi here. And
Hmm.
Jimmy, I know we've talked about you
Hmm.
being in here at some point as well. So I really appreciate you doing that. And
Hmm.
that'll be something everyone can look forward to in the future as well, all along this line of education, obviously. And
Hmm.
in saying that, what is something like with kids you come across, your how many children
Hmm.
do you have, by the way?
6.
Yes, I knew you had a handful. I have four. So, yeah, more than a
Nice.
handful, I guess. That six is more than a handful. So what is it? One of the last things here before we kind of wrap with
Hmm.
the book here quick. What are you doing with your children? Because again, one of my biggest passions, that's why I
Hmm.
started helping with Bitcoin
Hmm.
trading cards and Aladdin, what's going on
Hmm.
here is kids, it's education, it's
Hmm. Hmm.
homeschooling, that venture, at least anything but
Hmm.
government school. If it's private
Hmm.
school, great, homeschooling, whatever. And just being very cognizant of, you control the youth, you control the future. And what
Yes.
is it that you kind of could part with, or let people, impart on people, I guess, before we leave, in that
Hmm.
realm of maybe some things you're doing with your children, or the things that you've seen have worked for the younger generations when it comes to learning about some of this stuff?
Yeah, I try not to push like Bitcoin stuff on them, because like I mean, this as a parent, sometimes if you push too hard in one thing, then they don't want to learn about it. Which my
Come
kids
on, Dad.
are, yeah, kind of do. I honestly, the thing for me that I think has been the most rewarding as a parent is going on this trip for a year. And my wife and I were talking about it last night. It's like, oh man, it's a little boring now, because like we got I mean, we traveled 34 countries in
Wow.
277 days. It was a trip of a lifetime, and it's the sort of thing that I wanted to do before the kids left the house,
Hmm.
and I was able to do it because of Bitcoin, right? Like, because I had a savings technology, and I knew that, okay, it's going to cost about this much. We've saved up enough money. Let's go. It was.
Yeah.
I mean, it really
Yep.
was that simple. Unfortunately, under a fiat standard, you have no idea how much it's going to cost, because of course, like, there's inflation and all this other stuff. So you just sort of, like,
Guessing,
keep
just
put it
completely
off
guessing.
to the
Yeah.
next time or whatever.
Right.
And most people don't end up doing anything like that. um and I think seeing that, and having that opportunity to just travel with my kids and show them the world, and show them practical life skills, like, hey, here's some money, go find something to eat. Okay, so like, whatever you want to eat, I don't care. Like, and I know you don't speak the language, but point to a menu
Figure it out.
item, go figure it
Yep.
out, right? Like, that to me is way more, I don't know, like, that actually gives them real life
Yeah.
skills. And ultimately, I think Bitcoin stuff like falls under that umbrella. At some point, I will be transferring some of the Bitcoin that they've been holding with me, and into their own wallet, and it'll
Hmm.
probably be kind of a big deal, right?
Yep.
Because I've been saving for them, and sometimes Dave said, "Hey, Dad, buy me like $50 of Bitcoin because Grandma gave me a $50 bill."
That's cool.
Like that. At that point, I think I'm gonna have to show them. All right, here's how you use a hardware wallet, and
Mm-hmm.
here's how you back things up. And if you want to use like multi-sig or something like that, here's my key, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the direction I think that helps them really get it. Because in a sense, like I think this too as a parent, like they absorb a lot of stuff that you
Yeah.
had no intention of them absorbing from you, right? And I like my son, my oldest son is like pretty libertarian, right? And it's not like
So
I've
cool.
been like preaching
Mm-hmm.
libertarian values to him. It's just something he
Just the way
picked
you
up
live.
because
Yeah.
I talk about it a lot,
Yep.
and I have no idea that he's even absorbing this stuff, but
Wow.
he does.
So cool.
So I think Bitcoin can be very much like that. They all know I work in Bitcoin, but not necessarily the details. And we give them resources, but it's not like, hey, we're gonna have this 30-minute lesson on Bitcoin right now. It's just like ask me questions. I want to. I'm a big believer in children being curious and learning on your own, and having that motivation to learn on your own as being a very important part of becoming an adult.
So cool. What a way to wrap it. Where can people find you, or any last things you want to say, Jimmy, but also where can people find the book? Where can they buy it, and where can they find you and connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Jimmy Song, and there's like a bunch of links there. There's I think I have something similar to a link tree. It's like vida.page.
Vida. Yep.
Yeah, and that's a startup by one of my co-authors from Thank God for Bitcoin, Lyle Pratt. So go check that out. You can buy the book on Amazon. It's available right now. And if you do buy it, please leave a good review, or please leave a review. That I would really appreciate it. There aren't too many right now. The hardback cover, the audio book and ebook should be coming out in the next couple of months, and you'll be able to order all of that. I do plan on changing my fiatruinseverything.com. That's where the crowdfund was. So that'll become sort of like a permanent store for Fiat Ruins Everything stuff. You can also order from Bitcoin Magazine, and they take Bitcoin Lightning if that's how you want to pay. So yeah, that's where everything is.
Awesome. Awesome. Any last words or thoughts or anything at all before we wrap here?
No, I think I've said a lot,
We covered
and
a lot.
hopefully that's enough for you to noodle on. Yeah.
And I'll link to stuff in here as well for everybody, so that way they can find stuff easier as well. So thank you so much, Jimmy, for the time and imparting us with your knowledge. And it just so many people that are going to watch us obviously have not been in this space thinking about sound money, thinking about Bitcoin for nearly as long as you have. So thank you so much for being generous with your time. We appreciate it so much.
Yeah, no problem, man. It was fun.
Thanks, Jimmy. Oh, how did you like that? Boy, oh boy. I told you Jimmy is one of the smartest people out there, and has truly thought of everything in this space. He shares everything from personal tips to his family and orange pilling your children and helping them along their way, all the way to why Bitcoiners need to understand what sound money is, what Bitcoin is, and why it's so important to have that in your life, in the world, and how not to fall away from this space, which is, I think, some of the most important things. When you look at a lot of the OG Bitcoiners that have fallen away, and a lot of it comes down to that time preference, as he talks about a lot. Fiat destroying time preference, weaponizing attention, weaponizing compassion. And the book does a great job of outlining that and talking about the cultural disruption aided by fiat government currencies, aiding this process of re-educating, brainwashing ourselves, our children, in government-run schools, academia, culture, Hollywood, politics. It really is a disease. We have to reshape and bring us to a moral, ethical standard. And Jimmy always does an amazing job with that. Thank God for Bitcoin as well is one of my favorite books, if not my favorite book in the Bitcoin space. So go check this out as well. Fiat Ruins Everything and this book. This is amazing for people getting in the space that really don't know much, and very simple and easy read. So please go check those books out. Absolutely incredible books, and I cannot recommend them enough. So I hope you enjoyed this. Truly hope you enjoyed this, and Jimmy's truly one of the smartest people out there. Go follow him on Twitter. Go check out his books. We will link to everything here below. Please share this out as well, because the algorithm hates truth, and we need to get truth out in education more than ever. Appreciate you. We'll see you on the next one.